Yes, it has been another dramatic week in BC politics, and you'd be forgiven for losing track of who is running for which party at this point. Many former candidates and some longtime MLAs are now out of the race completely. A few BC United MLAs have moved to the BC Conservatives, while others will now run as independents. High drama in Victoria continues. The writ hasn't even been dropped yet. So here to discuss it is our On the Ledge panel. Justine Hunter covers the legislature for the Globe and Mail, and Katie DeRosa is CBC's legislative reporter. Good morning, you two.
Good morning.
Good morning, Gloria.
Now, Katie, as I said, this has been quite the game of musical chairs since BC United leader Kevin Falcon suspended his party's election campaign last week. So can you take us through who's in and who's out as a result?
Well, it has been stressful for those orphaned BC United MLAs, waiting to see if they'd get a call from John Rustad to see if they'd be drafted to the Conservatives. And some of the candidates were actually mulling their options publicly. Tom Shapika, who represents Kootenay East for BC United, he was on the early edition on Tuesday saying that he was waiting for a call from Rustad before deciding to run independent. And I tweeted that out on X, and BC Conservative Campaign Director Angelo Isidoro commented on my post saying he's not getting a call. So a bit of a cutthroat way to tell someone they're not wanted. But, in other cases, there were some candidates who turned down the chance to run with the Conservatives, saying that their policies conflict with their values, particularly on LGBTQ issues. That includes Megan Brame in Esquimalt-Colwood. So, all told, the Conservatives grabbed 3 MLAs who are sitting BC United MLAs. That's Ian Payton, Trevor Halford, and Peter Millibar. And I'm told that they are officially now BC Conservative MLA. So they have officially crossed the floor. And 4 former BC United candidates. So that kind of gives you an idea of who was holding the power in this arrangement. Falcon had to make 50 tough calls to his candidates who were dropped, and Rustad only had to turf 4 people. So those BC United candidates now have to decide whether to abandon their candidacy altogether or whether to run as independents. We have heard some are running as independents, but we haven't heard the full tally yet.
Well, sure. And speaking of independents, I mean, it's a short list of MLAs right now, but when we talk about independent candidates, just one person has actually pulled that off in the last 75 years. So what kinds of challenges do independent candidates face, Katie?
That's right. That was Vicky Huntington, who was first elected she defeated Wally Opal in the 2009 election, and she was reelected. But she's the outlier. The uphill battle is that the BC United candidates have to start over entirely. They're not allowed to transfer money that they raised for BC United to their independent campaigns. And they're also not allowed to even start collecting donations until the writ drops on September 21st. So I talked to Lumby Mayor Kevin Acton. He was BC United candidates for Vernon Lumby, and he says he's had to start from scratch. He's getting his potential supporters for his independent campaign to write him post-dated checks because, again, he can't raise till September 21st. And yeah, he says he's locked out of the $30,000 that he raised already for BC United. And so that is really an uphill battle to have to hold out your hand for donations again when your supporters already donated when you were running for BC United.
Right, and that's a short time frame, as you point out, waiting for the writ to drop. Now, Justine, the party that Kevin Falcon still leads used to be able to count on a large amount of support from the business community come election time, right? So what happened there?
Well, you can see in the filings to Elections BC that even by this early summer, the political BC United had been struggling to raise money this year. And at the same time that donations to the BC Conservatives under John Rustad had been growing rapidly. But what we learned last week was that this wasn't just a grassroots shift. It was business leaders and organizations that were making a point of starving out the BC United in an effort to shape the political landscape coming into this election. So Mr. Falcon had a lot of longtime allies and friends in the business community who made it clear to him that they were ready to abandon him publicly. People like his friend Chris Gardner, who's the head of the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association. He's got an organization of 4,000 businesses, and they were about to endorse the Conservatives for this election in a public announcement just before the campaign started. So clearly, Mr. Falcon got the message that his friends and allies weren't going to be standing by him if the center-right vote was split in this coming election and the NDP hang on to power as a result.
Yeah, but Justine, the province's campaign finance reforms mean that the big money donors, they don't have as much influence as they used to. So how will party fundraising shape this election, do you think?
Yeah, you're right, Gloria. The days of those big players cutting $50,000 checks to sit down with the premier are gone, but there's still millions of dollars flowing into these parties through individual donations. The NDP tell me that they raised $1 million in August alone, and almost half of that, $400,000, was just in the last 4 days of the month, right after this announcement between John Rustad and Kevin Falcon. But when you look at the last public disclosure campaign donations, the NDP had outperformed all of the other parties combined when it comes to fundraising. So that means they have a considerably decent looking war chest right now. They'll have no trouble spending the maximum allowed during the campaign, which is about $5 million per party. Now, those donations only go up to the end of June publicly, so they don't really give us a good picture of where the BC Conservatives are at right now. But that party does assure us they're in good shape and that they expect they'll be able to spend the maximum or close to it. So, and given the trends, I don't doubt that. So the NDP probably have a lot more money to spend right now before the writ drops on September 21st. But once the campaign starts and voters are really starting to tune in, it looks like a pretty even playing field between the two main parties when it comes to spending.
Well, it was interesting to see, Katie, the polling firm Angus Reid. They were on it right after the stunning announcement by Kevin Falcon and the BC Conservative leader John Rustad. So, on it, I mean, polling British Columbians. What does their poll tell us about how voters are reacting to this Unite the Right effort?
Well, it's definitely given a boost to the BC Conservatives, who are now, according to that poll, in a statistical tie with the NDP. So, the interesting takeaway for here is how BC United supporters would sway, because there was a lot of talk from those centrists who said, well, they're lamenting the gap in the political spectrum, that it's now the Conservatives further to the right and BC NDP on the left. So, but the poll shows that 68% of BC United supporters plan to vote or support Rustad's Conservatives, while 17% would swing to the NDP and about 8% undecided. That poll also said that Premier David Eby is still viewed more favorably than Rustad, but Rustad is catching up. The survey also suggested that British Columbians are twice as likely to say their opinion of Rustad has improved compared to Eby. Now, Rustad has been a lot more, vocal. He's been doing interviews. He did an interview with Jordan Peterson, and that's been, has been met with some backlash. There was criticism of his position on climate change, for example, where he said that humans are basically just in the West are a rounding error, and we can really do nothing to impact the climate and climate emergencies. And also, he faced backlash from First Nations leaders who sent a letter yesterday saying that some of his comments about Indigenous property rights were offensive. So again, Rustad is being more vocal, but that has its downfalls as well.
Well, and Justine, when we're talking about polls, the governing NDP, they've watched their massive advantage in the polls all but evaporate this year. What do you see as the fallout for the NDP as a result of this change?
Well, it's interesting. So Angus Reid has been consistently polling. So since the 2020 election, the NDP have had a pretty consistent base of support, somewhere around 45% of leaning and decided voters. So they haven't lost their base, but the Conservatives have caught up to them. So the gap is closed. That means the New Democrats face a much tougher race now. Perhaps there's some people in Mr. Eby's office that will be saying, I told you so, when they were encouraging him to call a snap election a couple of years ago. But on the big issues that matter to voters, it's interesting. Things like access to health care, the high cost of housing, concerns about public safety. The NDP government's record is not really helping them right now. And that Angus Reid poll suggests that even their own supporters are not confident that David Eby's party has all the answers. So you can be sure we'll hear a lot from the Conservatives in the next few weeks about those weaknesses. They'll blame David Eby for the opioid crisis, for the high cost of living, persistent challenges on housing costs. But what's not clear to me yet is whether voters have been persuaded that John Rustad's party has the solutions.
Hey, listen, good to talk to you both this morning. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Gloria.
That is our On the Ledge panel. Justine Hunter covers the legislature for the Globe and Mail, and Katie DeRosa is CBC's legislative reporter.